Well, welcome. We are so glad to be back with you. I'm sorry I was a little distracted by the chat pod and all of the weather reports around the world. Um, so whether you are in sunshine or snow, we are so glad to be with you. As shelter in place and lockdown plans begin to shift and adjust in countries and states and local areas across the globe, it seemed prudent to us to turn our attention to planning for reemergence, whenever that may be for each of you. I know you've been having some conversation about it in the Facebook group as well. So for this conversation, today's first secret word is flexible. Today's first secret word is flexible because this planning and its execution is likely to require us to be just that, very, very flexible. So as we get into today's topic, we want, as always, just to remind ourselves the goals that we're working from. And we've been sort of, touching on all three of these throughout the program. We're definitely going to be focusing today primarily on goal number 2, emerging strong from this crisis. Of course, all of these are so deeply intertwined, and so, we'll be weaving them all in. But today, our focus really turns to, okay, what does this all look like going forward? And as we do that, though the reemergence will follow different timelines and paths and visions for each of you. You share the common challenge of charting your vision and path and executing it successfully for your business, and safely for yourself and all that you serve. And so today we will be we'll be talking about how to plan for the coming months and beyond. We will not be discussing when you should reopen. You will likely have opinions about when and whether, and of course there are going to be all of the local regulations and safety concerns and things like that that are very individual. So we ask you to stay focused in the chat on the how, on your planning and your vision for your business, as opposed to specifics about timing and that sort of thing. As many of you have expressed in the chat, in the Facebook group, and to us directly, one of the most valuable and game-changing aspects of this program has been the community and the camaraderie, has been this group of colleagues coming together to support one another. And we just wanted to take a moment to celebrate what you've helped to build here and to remind ourselves of its tremendous value and to ask you to especially honor it today. We really, truly are all in this together, and we are so fortunate for it and so much better for it as well. Okay, so let's jump in. And where better to start than with a plan? Planning is always key to business success. Without it, we're left to react to the moment, missing opportunities and living with the elevated stress of not knowing whether we're on a solid path. Planning allows us to make the best decisions that are informed by our goals. And as an old teaching colleague of mine used to say, it's generally unwise to fly a plane if you don't know where you're headed and you don't know the route for getting there. So we definitely want at all times, but especially in the current climate, to be planning ahead as much as possible. So the thing is, though, planning ahead, planning takes a lot of intensity and image to begin with. And here we have all of these hurdles, right? We don't know when things will get back to normal. We don't know what the new normal will look like. It makes it a little bit hard to plan. But here's something we do know. We do know with some pretty solid certainty that things are going to keep shifting for a while, right? That we're hearing from medical professionals and scientists and officials and whatnot that this is probably going to be ongoing for a while, and it's going to be shifting around us, reopening and reclosing, and we don't know exactly what it will look like, but we know that it's not going to be settled anytime soon. And in a way, if we're careful about the perspective we bring into this, we can actually take some comfort from this, that at least we know this. We can stop trying to figure out, well, exactly when is, when are things going to, be back to the way they were. We can take that into account in our planning, the certainty that there is going to be uncertainty. And I would encourage you on some level to take some comfort in that, because at least we know what we're dealing with. But on top of all this uncertainty and this ever-changing environment that we're going to be subjected to for a while, this is also, as we've talked about together before, it's also thrust all of us into a learning curve, and in many cases, multiple learning curves. That in the middle of all of this, we're also involved in all of this new skill acquisition. And so that complicates our planning as well. And there are these big hurdles, and then there are all the smaller, more practical ones that come from those, the tech challenges, for example, the marketing challenges, just to name a couple. And then we also have the emotional pieces too, right? You all have, been just tremendously open in sharing some of these with us and with each other. The fear that you felt, the struggle against perfectionism, the stress we're all under, the kind of that overwhelm bit of just so much to do, and how do we prioritize, and all of this. And so we thought that we would just take a moment today just to acknowledge that, just to just step back and say, all right, as I go into this moment of planning for the immediate and the longer term future, what are the challenges that I'm facing? So we thought we would invite you to come into the chat pod and just share, what are the challenges that feel most pressing to you still at this moment? So Karma K9 talking about getting new customers. Nancy says 2, no clients. Angela's teaching her first online puppy class on Wednesday. You have to let us know how that goes. That's very exciting. Francine says definitely technology. Finding training space. All of the online challenges, Doris says. But she's excited about that. I love that. Francine says so much to learn. Yes. And Laura says, that conversion, right, of getting the things that we know how to do to work in virtual session. Maria says really nervous about being pushed to do in-person stuff before she's ready. And Gina's going to talk a bit about that a little bit later. I think that is a really important issue. What else? What am I missing here? This all goes so fast here. Yeah, and Paula says, just all these ideas, but how to put them into effect and get them to work, and
some concern around liability and protecting yourself from liability from Michael.
Yeah. We'll speak to that a little bit more later too. That's such a big one.
Linda, a good point about client compliance with COVID-19 safety measures. We can tell them what we want them to do, but will they?
Yeah. No, it's really true. And just all of the pressure and importance on that. Right. That as always, in any human endeavor, there's that bit about what we can control, our own selves and actions, and what we can't, those of others, right? Oh, congratulations, Sylvia, on your class. That's fantastic. So there are all of these things, you've mentioned the marketing and convincing clients and the tech issues and just trying to figure out how to prioritize and put all of this into place. There's so much of this. But one of the things about facing challenges is just naming them first. And so I'm going to hand things over to Gina now to talk a little bit about solutions.
Yeah, no doubt that we are still facing some very big challenges, as Veronica just mentioned. But I really wanted to talk about what we've learned already. We have developed new skill sets that have left us better prepared for whatever comes next. And I think that when we're feeling tired and overwhelmed, or I saw someone in the Facebook group say, I feel like an imposter right now. Like when we feel those insecurities, I think it's really good to just take a step back and look at how far we've come, celebrate some of the achievements, because you've done so much in the last couple of months. I think it's important to remind ourselves of this, of the tools that we have now that we didn't have 2 months ago, or maybe that weren't very sharp 2 months ago and are now. We have already created so many creative solutions. And so let's remind ourselves of the business lessons that we have learned so far that we can also continue to use then going forward. And I just did a little brainstorming, and the first thing that came to top of mind, both in what I've seen from you and in what I've seen throughout the 20 years at Dog Biz, is that successful businesses understand flexibility. They're able to react to the changing needs of their clients, and to the kind of the shifting sand that we walk on right now. And you have done a beautiful job of that. Many of you in 2 months ago did not have an online program, and are either in progress or have already started one now. If we were just kind of as business planners sitting down and coming up with how to take you online, we would probably have given ourselves more than 2 months time to do it. But you have been flexible, and you've been able to change and adapt to new things in order to better meet the needs of your clients. That is going to serve you so well going forward. Along with that is that creativity that we've seen from you. Amazing. I love to go into the Survive and Thrive Facebook group and just kind of scroll through and see what you're doing next, because you've been so creative. Part of the reason we've been able to be that creative is because we were forced into more space. We were forced into being less busy for a period of time, or forced to back away at the very least from thinking of our dog training the same way we always did. And when we did that, when we gave our minds a rest, we made space for creativity. Again, that is something that we can take forward from now and all the way through our business, which is when we start to feel ourselves get on that treadmill, is to hit the pause button and remind ourselves that it is important to give ourselves space so that we can have the creativity that it takes to really innovate and to move our businesses forward. But neither of those two things could have happened if you hadn't done this next thing first. And that was to let go of fear. And I know that sometimes we let go of it and then we hold it again, and then we let go of it and we hold it again, and that's okay. But you are already starting to recognize what happens, what can happen when you let go of fear. Jean Biggins had a great story that she shared in Survive and Thrive about having seen Dog Biz many times at conferences and other places, and she had heard us talk so often about packages and knew all the reasons why they were a good idea, but just had never done them until the crisis. And then the crisis hit, and Jean let go of her fear, and she put packages on her website, and within 24 hours had sold 2 of the largest ones on her site. And what I thought was really powerful about what she had to say at the end of that post was that her takeaway was, even if it's scary, do it anyway. And I think that's something that we can use again to be braver in our businesses. When we let go of our fear, amazing things can happen, but we have to let go of that first. And so again, just reminding yourself, when you start to feel yourself clinging to the fear of the new technology, or the fear that clients won't come back, or whatever it is, that if you let go of it, you will make room for innovation. You'll make room for the solution. You have it here. You know that that's the first step. Along with that, perfection isn't necessary, I think, is a lesson that I've heard many of you say, oh yeah, I'm taking that one to heart, that sometimes done is better than perfect. I think that the climate that we live in right now has really allowed us to let go of some of our perfectionism, simply because everyone has had to do it all at once. We're not the only ones learning how to use online learning systems. We're not the only ones learning how to make sure everybody's muted when they come into the conference call. And so it's just created this environment culturally around a little more patience and a little lower expectation around perfection. And so I think that is a wonderful lesson to take forward for us, which is, sometimes you have to let go of perfection in order to let things happen. And so I think that is a good one to take away. And then the last one that hit me was the idea that timing is everything. It made me think back to Jean again, which was, she had heard the message about packaging many, many times, but Jean wasn't ready to act on that information yet. And then when she was able to do it. That is this, we talk about this with your marketing all the time, right? We say that we want you to keep marketing because your message has to get to the potential client when they're ready to hear it. They might not be ready yet. It might not be your message. It might just be that they're not in a place to hear it or to act upon it yet. Sometimes that's true in training. We give our client a piece of advice and we're like, why are they not doing what I tell them to do? And again, you give that same piece of advice a little bit later and they take it. Timing is everything. It's everything with our marketing. It's everything with our services, having the right service at the right time. And I think what that means, or how we can translate that, is that means we have to be persistent and we have to be patient. We have to be persistent in our marketing, continuing to put it out there, even when it feels like it's not, like it's just not working, but to stay persistent with it. And then we have to be patient, because we have to remember that it takes time, and also to be patient with yourself. Be persistent in trying new things, but also be patient when you don't get it right the first time, or when someone has to bring an idea to you more than once. Remember that, again, it's important to cut yourself some slack and to be patient with yourself as well. So these are the lessons that I feel like I've seen over and over again in our conversations and on the Facebook group. But I would really love to hear in the chat now from you about what lessons are you taking away from this crisis? What lessons are going to guide you and your business going forward? Because I think it would be interesting just to see, kind of what is important to each of you. And Veronica, you can pop in too if you're seeing things before I do.
You got it.
I'll give you all just a minute to do that. Anne says that sometimes done is better than perfect. She really appreciates that. Yeah, and I think that is not an easy one for many of us. It is, it is really difficult to turn on that camera and just record something. But that's a valuable lesson to take away. Mary says many of you are feeling like imposters right now. Yeah, I think we expect too much of ourselves sometimes. We feel like we have to know everything. But in fact, what we really have to know is more than the clients, right? We have to help move them along. We don't have to have all of the answers. We just have to be able to help. And I think sometimes reframing that makes it a little easier. I don't know, Veronica, if you have other thoughts on that, but that's kind of my go-to is how can I help? I don't have to be perfect. I don't have to be the best. I have to be able to help.
Can I make a difference? That's always been my, can I make a difference? If I can make a difference, then I need to get out there and do it.
Oh, that's great.
I love what Nancy says, that one of the things she's learned is trying new things, just putting them out there, and that the right people will show up, learning every day, so that, she can get better and better at what she's doing. I love that. That's a great way to fight the imposter bit too, is to be committed to always learning, always growing.
And Paula says, has learned that being flexible is a skill. Right. It's not that we come hardwired to accept change, because we don't, that it is a skill and therefore we can get better at it. We didn't, so I love that. It's a good outlook.
That's a wonderful way to put that. And and speaking of skills too, it is interesting, thinking about all the skills we're building. Lisa was saying that she feels she's significantly better now at giving verbal instructions to clients after all the virtual lessons, and that she's better at giving the client, the owner, more responsibility for the actual training, and that's been really successful. And those things are so amazing.
Mary was talking about feeling a little doubt about raising rates and trying to let go of the fear about raising rates. If you're feeling that way, I encourage you to go back to the Dog Biz YouTube channel and look at the session that we did on with pricing and policies, because we gave some great language and a great pep talk in there, and maybe you need to hear the pep talk again. I know sometimes, especially when we're talking about pricing, we need to hear it more than once. So I encourage you to go back. Your colleagues had some great suggestions in the chat for that. That might be helpful as well.
Yeah. Amanda says there have been so many opportunities to try new things. And she's only half of them work, maybe even less, she says, but the ones that do are awesome new ways to do things that we can help to use clients going forward. And what a beautiful perspective, right? Opportunities to try new things, and how wonderful that even if 25 or a third of them work, like how wonderful. And I think that's so important, is to be focused on those successes. I love that, and to reframe it as that opportunity.
Right. Wendy says, I'm becoming a better teacher by improving my coaching skills instead of relying on taking the leash. I love that. Sometimes we're forced to learn to be better teachers because of this environment. And I think we're going to be better teachers and better trainers because we have to observe more instead of just doing. And I think that's exciting.
Yeah. So true. And Francine just said that probably the best thing that's happened is that she hasn't felt alone through this. And I think that, that's been a really powerful theme for all of us. And that's something that we certainly want to see guiding all of us going forward. I think that's been one of the most significant changes. And I'm so glad to see that.
Yeah, I think as an industry, I think that's the biggest industry takeaway, has been watching the power of what we can do when we work together. So that's great. Well, I'll let you continue sharing over there. I'm going to go ahead and move this along a little bit though, and just to kind of say that, in a nutshell, what we've learned through this crisis, and what I think, we've known at Dog Biz for 20 years, watching you and your businesses, is that when you create nimble businesses, you are successful. When you are able to be flexible, good things happen, and you have successful businesses. And so that's just kind of the overall solution to keep in the back of your mind. We can plan for various contingencies, and we're going to talk about how to do that coming up next, but always in your mind of, can I stay flexible to the best of my ability? So let's look at flexible service structures to start with, because this is one place to start. When it's time to start thinking about what's it going to look like when I reopen, and what does reopening really mean? What is that going to look like? It's going to be different for each of you. I wish we could just give you a map and just say, on day 32, do X. But it just doesn't exist. And it couldn't possibly, because each of you, your businesses are so individual. They have different concerns. You share some challenges, but you also have some things that make you really individual. And so I think just talking about these in the abstract to kind of get you thinking about, what considerations do I need to make before I open? What plans do I have in place, is something that we can help with. So for instance, the first thing to think about is, are you comfortable waiting to reopen, to do things in person, until you can do it all at once? Classes, privates, no masks, the whole bit. Are you going to wait till then? Or are there going to be some gradual steps along the way? And I think for many of you, there's going to be some in-between period. Some of you may start with, some of your services, but not all of them. So for instance, you may do your private training, but keep your in-person and your classes online. Maybe you'll take your board and trains and your day training clients first, and then start working into in-person coaching sessions as you see how the virus is working in your area. So it may not be just open the doors. There may be some intermediate steps. And if so, then you're just going to need a plan for the intermediate time and then a plan for the end. Just it needs another contingency plan is all. Some of you may choose some hybrid structures. And if you are already thinking about this, I'd love for you to share those in the chat, some of your ideas for hybrids. So things like maybe you, if you're doing day training, maybe you go back to training the dog in the home, but you only do your transfer sessions online and you work that way for a while. For classes, maybe you do quite a bit of it recorded. You record the intro concepts, and then you meet in person, outside, or maybe later on in the sessions, after, so let's say your restrictions are lifted today, maybe your first few sessions are online, and then as things seem to be safe, then you decide to try some in-person. So just kind of thinking about what might a hybrid look like, as opposed to going, we don't have to go back to exactly the way we did it before. So how can we do those? Linda is talking about some of the intermediate steps might be meeting outdoors, videotape them, and then do the review by Zoom. Nice idea. Yeah, if you have other hybrid ideas, go ahead and put those in the chat. And then I would say this next piece, I've seen some of you who have just embraced online learning and decided you don't want to go back, and that's okay. That's great. But for those of you who are kind of in that boat, others of you, like, you just can't wait to get back to seeing your clients in person. It really doesn't matter kind of which end of that spectrum you are on. I will say, the point is to have a plan for how you want to move forward, but then I also encourage you to maintain this online infrastructure that you've put into place, particularly if you've already spent quite a bit of time doing so. We don't know what the future looks like. We've never been through this before, but when you listen to health experts, most of them talk about the possibility, at least, of opening and closing and opening and closing, like things, we're going to have to be flexible. And so if you get to a point where you're able to get everyone back in class in person, don't lose those structures, those online structures, in case there's a time where you need to go back and rely on them for a bit. It's a real possibility. So let's not lose the work that you've done. So just to kind of say that, in order to prepare for that, then we need to look at our service and refund policies right now. We need to put together policies that allow us to be flexible. So our contract needs to have some language around the idea that you're not promising them in-person classes. If it's safer to take those classes online at some point, you may do that. So they are buying into your help and not the modality in which you deliver it. We want you to be able to be flexible. We want you to be able to say, no, we cannot meet in person this week. We've had a flare up or what have you. Now we're going to meet online. We're not going to put things on pause. We're going to keep working. We're just going to work in this different way. So we want to make sure our contracts reflect that we make sure that we're clear that we will not refund for that if you have to close again, that again, they're agreeing to the service in whatever way you choose to deliver it. You may also want to make sure in your liability waivers that you are adding some language around pandemics, not around COVID specifically. I would make it more broad than that. This is a really good time to take your liability waivers back to your lawyer and have them just a brush up. We do this from time to time anyway. It's just good hygiene for your contracts. Now's a great time to kind of just revisit it and make sure that you've got yourself covered before you start taking clients on in person again. You may also choose to prioritize some services over others. So you may choose to prioritize your taking in, your private cases over your classes, or vice versa. If you have really been enjoying your online classes, maybe you're going to put your emphasis there and building that online class program. If you find that that's been successful for you and for your clients, now is a time where you get to kind of just step back and say, okay, I've been doing this for a few weeks now. What is working for me? What is working for my clients? Which services do I want to take forward then? And so now is a great time to do that. I think Veronica just put in the chat that she has a meeting with our attorney tomorrow to take a look at the contracts that are on the business toolkit. So for those of you who have the business toolkits, then know that you will be getting a follow-up email about that. And just, you'll automatically get an update as we update those for the time. So just know that. If I missed anything on that, Veronica, let me know. In addition to these flexible service structures, then the next piece that you'll want to start to think about before you open up are just your safety procedures. So things like, again, inside versus outside. Can you prevent cross traffic if you are going to be inside? Are you working in public spaces or private spaces? What are your options there? If you are going to, I have social distancing policies down here. If you are going to rely on social distancing to do a class, for instance, how are you going to make sure that students maintain that distance? If you're hoping they'll eyeball it, I will say that's not going to work so well. But what you might do is if you're inside, you might use painter's tape to mark off each person's work area. Someone on the Survive and Thrive Facebook group had a really great photo of the setup that they're using, where each station is kind of got walls, and they're in a pin. The owners are in a pin, so that they can't move around outside of the 6 feet. Some of you have said you're using 10 just to give yourself a little more space. So that's great. Just thinking about how can we set these up? And then when you think about attendance, are you going to have a full class? Are you going to have a smaller class because of space constraints? Are you going to allow more time in between your classes? Don't forget the transition time, because I think this is where we're most likely to encounter problems. Like, people will be really hyper aware when they're in class, and then they walk in the hallway and they just kind of forget. So how do we get them in and out of the class location safely? Those are all, considerations. And then of course there's the safety equipment. Are you using masks? Again, are you using barriers? Do you have rules about you not touching the dog in addition to them not touching each other's dogs? What does all of that look like? Someone brought up a really good point in the Facebook group that if you are using masks, it is going to be difficult for people to hear you. So you might need a microphone or some kind of amplification system. I know someone in the last group mentioned they're using a Bluetooth, because again, your voice is going to be muffled and no one's going to be able to read your lips. And so maybe you need some kind of amplification where you haven't needed that in the past. If you are wondering, like, what are the current safety guidelines, there are a few places I encourage you to bookmark and keep an eye on. APDT has their best practices for the current conditions listed. I believe that CPDT does as well. So I would use them and the AVMA for kind of thinking about dog safety. And then I would look at the CDC and the World Health Organization for people safety. I wish that someone would give you the here's the safest way to do this, but that does not exist. And so these are the agencies that are experts in their field that we can look to give us some guidance. The last one on this list is kind of part of all of this, which is also to keep in mind your own comfort level really matters. Only you know the special considerations that go into making these decisions for your business. Only you know if you or a staff member has underlying health conditions that might put you at greater risk. Only you know if you're providing support to an elder or to young children. You know the level of risk in your area, and whether or not your ability, whether or not you have the ability to mitigate risks. These are all important factors in making this decision for your business. And so I just really want to encourage you to not let anyone, not your family, not your friends, not your colleagues, and not your clients, tell you how to run your business. It's never a good idea to let them tell you how to run your business, but especially now. This is a decision that you need to be comfortable with. And so it's not only okay, but it's imperative that you make the best decision for you and for your business, and understand that might not be the same for the business down the road. And that's okay. We're not comparing. We just are going to do what's best for you, so that you stay healthy and so your business stays healthy in the long run. And so that's I wanted to say that about safety procedures, because there isn't a one perfect way right now. So let's just be supportive of each other in the decisions that we make. If you are going to open up, I do think that one thing that you really have to do is to have a plan in place for if a client tests positive. We don't like to think about that. We certainly hope it doesn't happen. But if you are going to open up to the public, then you should have this plan in place. And a great place to start with this is your local health department. That is why they are there. So don't be afraid to contact them. Understand that they are not going to have the specific answers that some of you are really hoping for. Sometimes their answers feel a bit vague or a bit unclear. Let's just remember that this is new territory for them as well, not just for us. And because they can't possibly understand all the nuances of every single business that contacts them, but they will give you, they'll give you local guidelines, local restrictions, and general best practices for the area. And so stay in contact with them. If the idea of even doing this, of even sitting down and thinking about what's going to happen if someone tests positive, starts to make you feel really ill, get sick at your stomach, you're getting a little nervous, if you're scratching your arms right now, whatever it is, you may not be ready to open up. That may be a sign that you're not quite ready to make this, to go ahead and dive forward. And if you are not, that is perfectly okay. Even if in your area says it's okay to still say, I'm not ready. Again, don't do it just because everyone else is doing it. We have always said that at Dog Biz. It is important to know what everyone else is doing so that you know how you're different. But what we counsel after that is then to put the competitor stuff away and focus on what you do and do it really well. Not worry about what everyone else is doing. Now is no different. In fact, it's maybe even more important now, which is just to know, what is the service that I am providing? How can I help people? And I'm going to stay really focused on how I can help and not worry about what everyone else is doing, because that's crazy making. But also because there are enough dogs that need training to go around. There is room for all of us, especially right now. Dog adoption rates in some areas are high, really high. Breeder lists are longer than ever. People are getting dogs right now because they're either at home or they want some emotional support. So the work is there, and it will continue. I think the longer people live with these new dogs under these restrictions, there'll be a bit more work. So let's just remember, we've got plenty to go around. Let's do what's best for our businesses. Okay. So those are some of the considerations that we want to make sure you're thinking about. If we've forgotten any, don't hesitate to put them over in the chat. But those are some just basics things that you need to have thought through before you start to open up again, and start thinking about, you know, what post-crisis life is like with your business. And now I think Veronica has some more good news for you.
Yeah, so with all of this in mind, let's talk about solidifying your planning. We thought that a summary checklist might help. And so we've put a basic one together. And as you look at this, if the initial glance at it makes you feel a little overwhelmed, uncomfortable, here's a thought to help make the list feel a little less daunting. I think we're waiting for it to come up on screen here. As you look at this checklist, here's something to think about. These are all topics that we've already touched on in Survive and Thrive. These are all things you've already had occasion to think about, to share ideas around, get inspiration from each other, and to begin to work on. We've talked, early on about establishing your revenue needs. We've spent a couple of different sessions on defining your services, putting your policies in place, and making sure that you've got good, powerful rates, both for now and to see you through into the future. We've worked on marketing message in one session and marketing projects in another. So none of this, if you think about it, you're not starting from ground zero on any of this. And so that's just something to kind of take heart on. And one thing I really would suggest too, if any piece of this is still feeling, a little fuzzy, and you sit down to start planning and you're just not really quite sure, it's just not coming together, go back to the recordings from our previous sessions. It's part of why we've made them, is so that you can, everyone's under a lot of stress, and we have been covering a lot of ground together over the last 6 weeks. And as with any learning process, even in a time when you don't have stress clouding that process, it is so beneficial to go back and look at things again with fresh eyes, with fresh perspective, with a little bit of time passing. And so give yourself the room and space to go and do that. Also, just a reminder on the marketing piece, just to remember that persistence is key. That there was a bit earlier in the chat bot about marketing really being about time. And it's really true. Remember that even in the best of times, you don't market your business and then suddenly there's, just everybody takes you up on a new idea or what you have to offer. I mean, it takes time and repetition. And that kind of persistence, that confident, calm persistence, is more important now than ever, right? We've talked about that a number of times together. So if it's not working yet, don't, you just keep moving on that. And then, of course, the thing that we introduced today, Gina was just talking about with your safety plan, remembering that's got to be in place before you start in-person services again. Again, you can rely on organizations like APDT and CPDT and agencies like CDC and WHO and AVMA to guide you here. So you're not alone in this. You don't have to create this from scratch. So remember that you still have all these resources to pull together as you begin to tackle your checklist. But if looking at the checklist freaks you out a little bit, if it's causing some anxiety, another reason not to worry is to remember that you're not alone in that, and that the lack of regular structure, the lack of a regular schedule, combined with all of the change and the uncertainty and the generalized stress, makes it hard to plan and especially hard to execute. And so if you're still feeling overwhelmed, or even just not moving and getting things done as quickly as you'd like, or you're struggling to prioritize, tasks and just kind of figure out where to start and which foot to put in front of the other right now, etc. We just want you to know that next week, we're going to turn our attention to helping you create structure and processes for getting done what needs doing. So we'll be turning our attention to that next week to help with this. So you're working on some plans this week. We're going to work on execution next week. And it will be helpful for next week if, and for your planning work this week, to take a moment to identify anything that's holding you back at the moment. Be that in the emotional realm, fear, overwhelm, for example, or the practical, the tech issues, the learning curves, or even a house full of kids trying to homeschool while online while you're trying to get your work done. And so we thought we'd just invite you to jump into the chat and just talk about what are those things that are restricting you? What's keeping you from taking your next steps? And let's just talk a little bit about that today. Let's clear the air a little bit on that and get ourselves ready for the planning and execution.
Veronica, while you're thinking on that and putting stuff in the chat, I'm going to put you on the spot a second. I hope you can remember, because we were having a conversation a couple days ago about language for when people push back about, I want you to come in person now because maybe restrictions have been lifted, but the trainer's not comfortable doing that yet. Do we have any tips for how to handle that?
So tips for clients who are pressing for in-person services when the business isn't offering that yet?
Right.
Yeah, so one thing I would recommend, going back to, can't think which session it was. I want to say 2 or 3, where we talked about marketing message. And because one of the things that we talked a lot about in that session was, we did that incredible brainstorm of all of the advantages of online services. And so I think one thing that you can say is that you have a real responsibility to your clients to keep them safe. And while you are putting plans and that sort of thing in place for that, that what you found actually is that you're finding that these online services are so much more powerful. Let me share with you all of the advantages of working with me in this way. And so my instinct, to be honest, is maybe not to talk so much about why you're not going to do it in person, and to really focus on why you are going to do it online and the advantages of that. And then again, to invite them to come and give it a try. We've talked a few different times about finding ways to give people a little taste of it. Come have a half-hour conversation with me on Zoom. Let's just give it a go. I want you to see what this is like. And to see if that doesn't, help sort of push people forward. Because I do think that there's a risk, right, in getting involved in the conversation about whether or not it's safe and what the local guidelines say and all that sort of thing. I think we're just going to have to recognize that people are going to disagree about those things. So I think focusing on the positive of the service that you are offering. Oh, Gina, you're muted.
Got it. It's a little slower than I think it's going to be. So Nancy and some others have talked about, just the frustration of, not having clients and continuing to put their marketing out there and not hearing things back, and how frustrating that is. And of course, we keep telling you patience, but there's a limit to that. One piece of advice I would give you is do whatever it takes to have an online client. If you've had zero, if you've really truly had zero, whether that's offering a session to someone, getting a friend to do it, but just do an online session that you can use so you have a sample. So you have something that people can take a look at, or whether you do that live with, people who are kind of interested in training, but let them see how powerful it can be, because often that's the stumbling block, is they just can't get around this idea that dog trainers could work online, and you just have to prove them wrong. You have to show them that, and it can in fact be helpful. So if you haven't done that yet, that's one quick tip to try. And then we've had a few others, Michael and Laura.
I just wanted to say, that social proof is so powerful. And also, Laura just popped into the chat pod with a piece of advice I think is really great too, that, if you're seeing a really dry market, try to do some marketing specifically around puppies and newly adopted dogs, because that really is, that really is a growing segment at the moment.
Yeah, I would encourage some of you, if you've got some responsible breeders in your area that you wouldn't mind teaming up with, I really encourage you to reach out right now. I happen to have been in contact with several breeders lately, and they weren't aware that dog trainers were still, were still offering help. And they were thrilled to find out that when their puppies were going home, that they were going to be able to get them some help and get them started. And of course, their big thing is potty training. They all told me potty training. My clients don't know how to potty train, and we can do that online. We can give that advice online. So so those are some other places.
And that's a powerful referral source to be courting right now. And the cool thing is, it doesn't matter where the breeders are, right? Because you can work with them from anywhere. So I think that's something that is, you should really be thinking about, is looking at, breeders that you think are doing a good job out there, doing some research online and approaching them about some marketing partnership. What you can do for their clients, and also along the lines of what you were saying earlier about that kind of social proof piece, just showing people that it works. Irene said that she published a 90-second sample of a Zoom training with a client, which I'm sure with the client's permission, of course. She did a sample and published that on her website, and it just brought in a new client for her. So congrats to that. But yeah, that's another way to show people what it looks like and what's possible and how powerful it can be.
Yeah, and I will just say another thing about the breeders is that their clientele are a little more predisposed to using online services, because they did define their breeder. Their puppy, if they're really good, their puppies may be going all over. So again, it might just give you an audience that's a little bit warmer for your marketing message. So those are some thoughts on that.
And Kelly says that she's partnered with a rescue this week and will be providing a flyer on puppy services to all of the adoption packets for the puppies. They've got over 30 puppies coming into the rescue this weekend. So yeah, really looking for those opportunities too. Because remember too, that if you can get somebody else to say that this is a good idea, that often works, right? Like, we toot our own horns. It's not the same as somebody else saying, oh, hey, this trainer's doing this amazing thing online. You've got to be part of this. If you can get the shelter or the breeder or the veterinarian, whatnot, to say that for you, it helps push through that resistance as well.
And Allison and Anna, I see your challenge that when you are a one-person operation trying to get it all done, really encourage you to join us next week because I think you're going to find some wonderful tips there that will be really helpful. We've already started working on that one, and I think you're going to find it really helpful. But also just to say, remember, we don't have to do everything at once. And so it might be that you have to really pick and choose, because you've also got families and other things that you're managing, and that's okay. It's okay to have a plan that can't all be implemented immediately. So take some pressure off that way as well. Laura and Michael had expressed some concerns around just the tech. Video in particular seems to be a hot button. If you have not done our bonus tech talk, and you're really, really new to tech, I think the response from that was, I feel a little better. So maybe try that. But also, again, to say, don't try the huge project, try the small one. Just if it's your first time with video, choose one small thing that you can do that, put it out there. And I think when you see the response, it'll inspire you to do a little more.
Yeah. I love what Doris just said too. She says some days she picks and chooses what she's motivated to do. And really, every day that you do something, every day that you accomplish something, take a step forward, is that's a success. That's a win. So yeah, sometimes you just have to give yourself that mental space.
Oh, nice. Allison says that she's been doing informal stuff when it comes to video right now, with the idea that she'll polish it up later. I love that. I think that is the best way to approach video, because if you wait until the lighting is perfect and the audio is perfect and everything, you'll never get it done. And you're right, you can go back and polish and add to and clean up later. The important thing is to get your clients some help right now. Brilliant. Love that. Okay. Anything else there we want to perfect is great, but done is better. Nice,
Thank
Maria.
you for the reminder, Maria. It's
That's
so
great.
true.
Yep.
So true. I'll have to keep remembering that one. So here's something else that might be, helpful too, as we, as we sort of work to struggle with this big checklist and all these things that have to be done and whatnot, is just to remember still that that we are all in this together, right? We still have each other and the strength of this community, and that makes us better prepared for uncertainty. It makes us better prepared to overcome whatever holds us back, whatever our own challenges are, whether they're on the emotional realm or the practical realm. And you've expressed an interest in keeping this going in some some way here in the chat and the Facebook group, to us individually. And next week we're going to share something that we've been working on as a way to try to continue the work that we've begun together and Survive and Thrive. Because as we continue to face all of these challenges, we know that we're better together. So on those days that things just aren't rocking and rolling and things are feeling cloudy and you're struggling to move forward, just remember, even even though we're all isolated, we're not alone. We really are. We really are in this together. And so that then brings us to the second secret word today, which should surprise no one. It's together. Together, and Gina will put that into the chat pod just to make sure it gets recorded there. And so staying together then, our next session will be next Tuesday. And as I said, again, we're going to shift our focus from the planning piece to the doing piece. And so you've all got some ideas about what you want to do. We encourage you to work a bit on that this week, to do some real thinking around the topics that we've brought up today. And then next week, we're going to share some of our best ideas and notions and whatnot for just making the doing a little bit easier, especially in this time when our brains are foggy and we're stressed and we're juggling 10,000 things at home, etc. So we're going to work on that next week, and we'll share some ideas with you about next steps moving forward with this community as well. Anything to add to that, Gina?
No, I think that sounds great. I'm really looking forward to next week. I'm excited because I think they're going to find that really valuable, and appreciate all the time you've spent with us so far. It's been great. This is, I've said it a few times, that this group is proof that dog pros really are the best. It's just a great community.
Yeah, it really is.